February 24th, 2024. Well, this is the second anniversary of the beginning of the Ukraine war, but that's not the topic for tonight. I'm going to address some issues that has come to my attention very recently about the UFO issue, or UAP as we say nowadays, and it has some interesting history to it, which I've been pursuing this thing for some time, and I kind of see it a little bit like a detective case. That is to say, uh, somebody knows whether or not there's anything to these David Grush statements. Obviously, the government knows. Some people, I mean, there are people in it that know. Maybe probably most of the government doesn't know. And so I always look for supporting evidence of if the government has these crash retrievals and so forth, then probably their behavior will give it away, or certain actions they take would be indicative of them knowing this or not. Okay, so what the subject here is a item that was released, a declassified document from the Royal Australian Air Force, written in 1971. Okay, and it basically was an assessment of their evaluation of the U.S. attitudes and actions related to the UFO subject. Now, so hence this kind of makes this sort of an interesting insight into things. I mean, this is an intelligence organization from a close ally, one of the Five Eyes, security in terms of security and so forth, intel cooperation. So it's a little bit more than just what some UFO person, student thinks about it. And so there's a whole bunch of things which details the history going back to the 47 and the Blue Book and all that. But when you get into this document proper, very interesting, on paragraph 14, it discusses something, which is the decision to investigate the topic of anti-gravity or controlling gravity. And I'll read from this very quickly. A more astounding decision on the part of the U.S. government was to allocate considerable funds to the investigation of gravity as a means of controlling gravity, despite the fact that the science had not attained a level of competence to deal with either gravity or anti-gravity problems, and the only theory that might be applicable was Einstein's unified field theory, which was still incomplete at the time of his death. The U.S. chose to support 6 universities and government agencies in an all-out drive to conquer the problem. It's significant that at this time, the current theories on UFO propulsion were a mixture of gravity control and electromagnetic propulsion. So this gives us a little bit of a take, insight into this situation. Now, on the space show, when I appeared last December, I had sort of addressed a similar issue, but hadn't seen this before at all, this document. And I had pointed out the fact that I was saying one of the interesting things was that John Wheeler, who was a professor at Princeton, who had been involved mostly in nuclear physics, and been involved throughout the Manhattan Project. Was, I think, the chief scientist on the Hanford project to produce the plutonium that was used in the Fat Man bomb. And then after the war, of course, in the 50s, worked on the H-bomb project. And so, in spite of all this, nuclear activity, all of a sudden, he developed an interest in gravity and general relativity all of a sudden, and redirected his research and teaching toward that subject. And I thought, here you're dealing with a guy who clearly had the highest level, Q clearances on nuclear science, so it's definitely a trusted defense scientist and this is after 47 and Roswell and all that, and perhaps several other incidents, which I guess students of the subject are aware of. And I just thought that was interesting that he got interested in the subject, but there was nothing directly leading to that. Now, the only thing else I pointed out was that we know that the Battelle Memorial Institute had been involved in a lot of the UFO studies at that time, including the statistical studies on the reports for Blue Book, and then also they allegedly had worked on trying to reverse engineer the memory metal or to make some human created duplicate or similar thing. And of course, then I also noticed that the Battelle Memorial Institute had also sponsored a lot of lectures on these gravity research projects and the Battelle Recontras and so forth. And I was thinking, wow, that's interesting. But I didn't know the whole story. By the way, if you like these the videos, please give me a like. We're looking for more subscriptions as always, and you can, if those are subscribed, can click the bell for notifications. So, at any rate, so that kind of gets you to the idea there that this document says there was a lot more to it than that, and in fact there is. And I'll get back to the document as we go to paragraph 15. During 1955, because insufficient staff could be recruited for the project, recourse was made to urgent appeal to theoretical physicists and mathematicians from AERE Harville, UK. The six gravity research centers established were the Institute for Advanced Study, Princeton University. That would in fact be Wheeler, the University of Indiana. By the way, where one of Wheeler's students eventually became a professor, Gettr, the Purdue University Research Foundation, University of North Carolina, I was at Chapel Hill, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology through the Robert Babson Gravity Research Institute. Okay. The latter institute is a nonprofit organization founded in 1949 by George M. Rideout as president. It was believed to make a gravity motor, gravity differential was required, which necessitated the discovery of an insulator, deflector, or absorber of gravity. And by 1955, 485 essays have been written on the subject, and awards totaling $10,800 have been made for original contributions. Now, here's the interesting part here, even more so. Scientists involved include Teller from the University of California, the father of the H-bomb, Oppenheimer, father of the A-bomb, Freeman J. Dyson of the Institute of Advanced Studies, the person from the Orion nuclear-propelled spacecraft of the 50s, the aforementioned J.A. Wheeler, and Richard Arnowet of Princeton. The latter is another major gravity research person, GR. The Vaclav Havelty of the University of Indiana, who wrote a book on attacking Einstein's unified field theory work, and Stanley Desser, another top physicist in those areas. The objective was to control gravity. During 1955, the following firms entered into gravity or electromagnetic programs: the Glenn L. Martin Aviation Company, and specifically Dr. B. Heron from Göttingen and Dr. Pascal Jordan from the Hamburg University, who, by the way, he was a co-worker with Heisenberg on original quantum mechanics and had some interesting political conventions. We know kind of irrelevant to this. Convair of San Diego, Bell Aircraft of Buffalo, Sikorsky Division, Lear Incorporated of Santa Monica. Remember, the son of the founder of that was a big UFO guy. Clark Electronics of Palm Springs, California, and Sperry Gyroscopes Division of Great Neck, Long Island, New York. That's an interesting situation here when you look at all these scientists and institutions. Okay, now, such an intensive onslaught on the gravity enigma was entirely irrational from the standpoint of conventional science, which I fully agree. That from conventional science, that is pretty out there, and can only be rationalized within the context of a firm belief that UFOs were real and the intelligence behind them knew how to control gravity. The drive to harness this power before the USSR could do so would be a strong incentive for the U.S. government to fully support an anti-gravity programs. By 1966, 46 separate projects of this nature were being financially supported, 33 of which were under the supervision of the U.S. Air Force. Although details of most of these projects have been kept classified, it would appear that generally they have been not successful. I suppose some of the hardcore UFO people are going to be upset with that idea. Work on gravity waves by John Weber and his associates under U.S. Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratory jurisdiction has been reported to be fairly extensive since 1966. Now, this was written, remember, in 67. I would also point out that in later days, the LIGO project, which has discovered gravity waves, was, of course, I guess, headed up by by one of Wheeler's students there. And so, so you could see that what I would say, in fact, what I did say in the space show um, uh, presentation was that basically um, that I thought the main impact of this was not in any way progress toward anti-gravity, but it definitely stimulated a very noticeable amount of research in general relativity and gravity theory, and led to a lot of the work which eventually turned out to be black hole physics. And in fact, Kerr, who developed the original solution for the rotating black hole, which is the standard model of a black hole, was actually did that work under a U.S. Air Force contract in 1963. So, as you can see, there was a focus. This is real, and like they said, from a conventional physics point of view, not believing in if you don't believe in anything UFO related, you would think this was kind of wacky stuff. A gravity insulator, although it's interesting in a certain H.G. Wells book, is not known to exist, and there was no basis to assume it would exist, and so forth, at least in known science, known human science. And yet, this kind of effort was actually placed on this subject. Kind of fascinating, huh? So I just think this is supporting evidence. In itself, it doesn't prove a lot, except that people in the intelligence community of a close ally, which has a strong intelligence connection with the U.S., actually was seeing this. But it also seems that they're looking at it from outside. They know this is happening, and they don't know what's going on, but this is an assumption that they were making. Now, another thing that is kind of interesting, and a sort of another confirming effort, I would call it, was the fact that there was a Canadian who I guess was involved in security affairs who had made some inquiries about the subject of UFOs. This guy was interested in the subject and tried to find out what was going on. I guess this guy did have security clearances and part of Allied cooperation, and ended up talking to a physicist who was involved a lot in our radar work, particularly back in World War II. Their name's Dr. Sarbacher, and at any rate, the point is that there was a memo that was written. He got it, and he had found out that in fact that there really was work being done on this, and I think the people involved included Vannevar Bush, who was the big head chief scientist during the FDR Truman era, and chief science advisor, whatever. And then there was Oppenheimer, which already correlates with what I just said. And of course, with Oppenheimer comes the other nuclear physicists and so forth, who were highly cleared. And at any rate, he basically had said that these crash rumors were substantially correct. We have not been able to duplicate their performance. As far as we know, we did not make them, and they pretty certainly did not originate from Earth. The issue has been so sensitive it's classified 2 points higher than even the H-bomb. And in fact, it's the most highly subject in the U.S. government at the present time. Sarbacher then refused to say more. So anyhow, this kind of shows what the researcher, a guy named Bray, was able to come up with as he was following the history of Wilbur Smith and what he did back in the 50s, and at any rate, he found the name Sarbacher and checked in, and we're left Sarbacher did present the information I just read, and so I do think this seems to be a little bit of a security violation, to say the least, but I'd also point out that, of course, the H-bomb was well known by the 80s. That wasn't an issue anymore. But the issue about this was interesting, and the fact that this kind of came out this way. The H-bomb project was highly classified in 1950. It's interesting that he got into that kind of relationship there, perhaps at the time, but. So at any rate, that's what it is. I don't think, like I said, this isn't absolute proof of anything in isolation, but in context of everything else we know, including, David Grush's comments and his statements and testimony, and all the other things we know. You put that in the context of everything, it looks to me to be substantiating, and the story's kind of sticking together in a way. Now, in a way that sounds sort of plausible if you know much about the subject. Now, uh, there are a few things. I'm sure that some of the hardcore UFO people that believe everything, you will, probably go, they didn't actually succeed in achieving anti-gravity in 1950s, and probably didn't. But the point is, but it does indicate that they are looking at this subject seriously, even back then. And so so it is for now. I'll leave that kind of as it is. I do think that most of these scientists, some of the key ones are highly cleared. Maybe like Wheeler, Oppenheimer, some of the Teller may have known what this was about. But I kind of think many of the other people who are brought in maybe were never cleared for it. Maybe they're pure academics and were just given money to look into these possibilities, and were never told exactly why they were looking at them. And they probably looked at it as an opportunity just to get funding to do research that they were interested in, because the people running the thing probably didn't know much about the high level physics either. And so it leads to, a lot of, kind of churning around and so forth. But what really did come out was a real revolution in general relativity research, leading to black hole theory and gravity wave studies and efforts toward quantum gravity, which weren't as successful, but did produce some interesting math papers. This is all pre-string theory, by the way. This is back in the 50s and 60s now. So, at any rate, so I'll be wrapping this up for now. And of course, I'll put a link to that document in there if you want to read it to verify it. And then I will, of course, have the addresses of my social media accounts in the description below. And we'll be posting this on Rumble as well as YouTube. And this will be all for now.